Hey everyone, happy Father's Day weekend. Now, I have been in churches for a long time, and I just want to share an encouraging change that I see. You see, years ago in churches, Mother's Day would always be a day where moms would be celebrated, and rightfully so. And the message was always, Moms, you are incredible. Moms, you're the best. Thank you. And then every year I would observe as Father's Day would roll around, and the message on Father's Day would always be, Dads, you gotta do better. Get off the couch, help with the kids, pay attention, show up for your kids' dance recital. I mean, come on, dads. But I'll tell you, I think this is shifting in the last few years. In fact, I was looking at some Pew research that showed dads today spend 3 times as much time with their kids than they did 40 years ago. Dads today are doing 2.5 times the amount of household chores that they were doing 40 years ago, and that dads are more engaged than ever before with showing up for activities, doing things like bedtime routines, and talking about their kids with emotions and feelings. So dads, it's not like any of us have arrived, but I'll just say one of the things I love about The Crossing is that there are a lot of dads who are giving it their all for their family, their faith, and their community. So today we celebrate all dads, stepdads, granddads, uncles, everyone who has played a dad-like role in a kid's life. Happy Father's Day. Well, today we are continuing our series called Eternity Starts Now. We are looking at all things related to the end of the world, the return of Jesus, heaven and hell. And I got to tell you, this is a really important topic because there are a lot of people who say and do crazy things when it comes to the end times. In 2011, a guy by the name of Harold Camping went public saying that he had deciphered a secret message in the Bible. And based on his research, he was 100% sure that the world would end on May 21st, 2011. I mean, he had it even down to the hour, 6 p.m. His followers ended up spending over $100 million putting up billboards like this one, telling people that the end of the world was at hand. Well, May 21st arrived, 6 p.m. came and went, and wouldn't you know it, we were all still here. So what I loved is someone started anonymously putting up their own billboards that said this. And here's what I love about that sign, is that it gets to the heart of why we're doing this series. Because you see, sometimes in churches, people get really focused on end-time events. They start looking at things in the Bible and trying to match them up to events in our world. You see, a lot of times people get obsessed with things and events in the Middle East or trying to look for secret messages hidden in the Bible. And here's what they miss. They miss that the reality is when the Bible talks about the last days, the end of the world, when the Bible talks about Jesus' return, the emphasis is always on how do you and I live in the end times? I mean, how do we go on living knowing that our time on this planet is short? I mean, none of us know how much time we have left, do we? So how do we live in light of eternity, of knowing that our time on planet Earth is limited? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at one passage today. If you got a Bible, I want you to turn to 2 Timothy chapter 3. Now, the author of this letter is a pastor by the name of Paul, and he is writing to a young guy by the name of Timothy. Now, we don't know a lot about Timothy's life growing up, but it seems like he had a very involved mom and grandma, but an absentee dad. So Paul, this pastor, he ends up taking Timothy under his wing, and Paul becomes like a spiritual father to Timothy. And so towards the end of Paul's life, he writes this amazing letter to Timothy. It's what we call today 2 Timothy, and it is a fantastic read. I'd encourage you to read it on your own. And I'll just say, as someone who grew up without a dad, I love the letters of 1 and 2 Timothy because in them, Paul speaks to Timothy like a father speaking to a son. So today we're going to jump into chapter 3, where here's what Paul writes to Timothy. He says, verse 1, he says, "But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days." Pause here for a moment because Paul says there are going to be some really, really tough days in the future. Like things are going to get really bad. So happy Father's Day. Life is hard, right? But Paul tells us why in verse 2. He says, people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. Okay, we get this really long list, and of course we don't have time to look at all of these, so let's just look at a few things really quickly. Paul says, Timothy, be aware that in the last days, people will become lovers of themselves. Now, this is someone who is simply self-absorbed, someone who cannot help but think of only themselves. I bet all of you watching know at least someone who is self-absorbed. This is the person at the gym who is constantly trying to get the perfect video of themselves working out and is oblivious to the fact that other people are waiting. This is the person at work who is constantly talking about themselves but never asks you any questions. This is the person who treats a waiter or waitress like garbage because they can't see service people as real people. Paul says, hey, Timothy, be aware as history moves forward, people are going to become more and more self-absorbed. They will be lovers of only themselves. Next one, lovers of money. Now, when we hear that phrase, lovers of money, we probably think of someone who is very wealthy and very stingy. And of course, that can be true, but it's also possible to be a lover of money if you don't have any money. This would be the type of person who is constantly trying to get more money. They are obsessed with taking a higher paying job. They are constantly thinking, oh, if only I had more money, then I'd be happy. This phrase carries the idea of desperately wanting more, believing that money will solve all of my problems. You know anyone like this? I mean, most of us, we probably do. I mean, even some of us, we struggle with this ourselves. Okay, let's keep going. Paul says that in the last days, people will be abusive. Now, this one is a heartbreaking reality, of course, in our day. The CDC has released data saying that right now, about 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been victims of abuse in their lives. Could be physical or emotional, spiritual, sexual, but the reality is this. We live in a world where people abuse power. They do terrible, damaging things to others who are made in the image of God. All right, the next one I'm going to highlight on the list is people who are disobedient to their parents. Now, of course, you can probably imagine I was a perfect kid. And of course, my kids are perfect because I'm a pastor. But I've heard that out there in the world, there are disobedient kids somewhere. I mean, I've heard that there are kids out there who have complained about school going on forever. And now that it's summer, they're complaining because they have nothing to do and they're bored. I've heard there are kids out there who are mad at their parents because they refuse to buy them a $1,000 iPhone. I hear there are kids out there who complain and argue with every single little thing, who fight with their siblings every single day. Now, I don't know any of these kids, but I hear rumors that they're out there. Okay, one more. Paul says, there will be some who have a form of godliness, but deny its power. Okay, now, in our day, this would be like someone who attends church. They raise their hands in worship. They talk a lot about Jesus on Sundays, but the rest of their week, they look nothing like Jesus. They don't treat their spouse very well. They lie to customers in order to get ahead at work. They trash people on social media. They are people who claim to love and worship God, but they look nothing like Jesus. So Paul says, as time goes on, we're going to see more and more types of these type of people. People who are moving away from the heart and desire God has for them. And then he ends it with this phrase. He says, have nothing to do with them. Now, I want to be real clear on this. This doesn't mean like write those people off. It doesn't mean like, cancel them, kick them out of your life. What it means is simply don't let your life get too intertwined with people like this. The idea here is if you're dating a guy or girl and they claim to love Jesus, but their life looks nothing like Jesus, don't marry him. Or if you see a kid who is constantly screaming and angry at their parents, don't let your kids spend all day every day at their house. Or if you're considering going into business with someone who is proud, arrogant, or something like that, just be careful. Paul says, don't go into business with them. Paul says to Timothy, hey, in the last days, in this era of history that we're living in, things are going to get tough. Be careful of how you let people influence you. So here's why I bring this up. You see, the focus here in this passage when it comes to the last days or the end times, it's not, hey, let me give you some clues to the exact moment Jesus is going to return. Instead, the question is, how do we live in the last days? So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a brief overview of these final words Paul says to Timothy, the most famous pastor to ever live, the last words he ever writes. And he chose to write them to someone he deeply cared about, someone who he felt like was a son to him. And he chose to tell Timothy, hey, this is how you should live in this era of history. And if you've ever wondered, how do you make your life count on this earth? Like right here, this is the message for you. So he gives us three things. How do we live in the last days? First, Paul says, stay faithful. Stay faithful to the God who called you. I mean, continue to grow and lean in towards your faith. Here's what he says, verse 14, he says, but as for you, continue in what you have learned and become convinced of, because you know those from whom you have learned it. He says, hey, Timothy, keep going. Don't give up. You see, it's easy in our world to get distracted. It's easy to turn our focus from the things that really matter to something else. So Paul says, continue. Don't drift. I'll tell you, I've been a pastor for about 24, 25 years now. And I don't think I've ever met someone who woke up one day and decided, you know what, like I'm done with God and faith. I don't know anyone like that. I don't know anyone who's ever been like, I don't need grace anymore. I don't need Jesus. I'm out. But here's what I have experienced over the years. I know a whole bunch of people who got distracted, who at one point had experienced God do something powerful in their life, and over time, they drifted. For some, it might be that they got a kid who ended up getting a great offer to play on a competitive baseball team or swimming team, but all the games or meets are on Sunday. And so the parents, they told themselves like, it's only for a short season, but then one season became 2, and then it became 3, and then 4. And over time, they just kind of drifted from this faith that used to be so central to their life. And it's not that they stopped believing in God. It's just they found this gap begin to grow. Or for others, it's a breakup. Maybe you were in a dating relationship with someone and you broke up, and now it kind of feels awkward to go to the same church as them. And so maybe you take a season off from your small group or from church, and you tell yourself, well, I'll just, go away for a little season. Paul says, hey, man, our world is full of things that are going to pull you from faith. And so he just tells us, you got to continue. You got to stay faithful. Remember to stay connected to Jesus. So that's the very first thing. So how do we live in the end times? He tells us, stay faithful. But it doesn't stop there. He goes on and he says to speak boldly. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2, Paul says, he says, preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction. Now, when you and I hear this word preach, most people think about like what I do on a given week. And most of you, I know, don't want to do what I do. In fact, there's research out there that tells us that people's number one top fear in life is public speaking. And their second highest fear is death, meaning most people would rather die than speak in public. And so when most of us, when we see this word preach, we think, oh man, I could never do that. I'm so glad I don't have to do that. But here's the thing. This word preach, it's actually the Greek word caruso. And yes, it means to preach, but it's actually bigger than that. It carries the idea of a messenger or herald. The idea is this. It's someone who declares what they know to be true. All right, now in the ancient world, of course, there was no Instagram or 24-hour news stations. So whenever something important happened, the king would send a messenger, a herald, to go out and tell people the news. Things like great news, like, hey, our country won a war, or there's an abundance of food this year, or great news, your taxes are going down. Probably no messenger ever had that news in history. But the idea here is not, hey, stand on a stage and deliver a 30-minute message. No, it's more of, hey, the word preach, it means to declare what you know to be true. We actually see a great example of this in Mark chapter 5. In Mark 5, Jesus meets a guy who's in a really bad place. I mean, he's homeless, he's scary, he's been abandoned by his friends and family. But Jesus goes out to this guy, he heals him, he cares for him, he blesses this guy. And we find this guy, his life gets transformed by Jesus. And here's what he does. Mark chapter 5, verse 20. It says, "So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis." Now, this is the city in which he lived in. He began to tell how much Jesus had done for him. And get this, all the people were amazed. That word tell is the same word caruso. This guy, he didn't get a microphone and start preaching. He just began to open up about what God was doing in his life. And so when people came up to him and were like, "Dude, you are a completely different person. What happened?" He was able to say, "Yes, I am different. I met Jesus and Jesus changed everything." You see, that's this word caruso or preach. The idea is we share what God has done for us. Paul says, "Hey, Timothy, don't forget to tell people what God has done for you." Now, I know many of us, we get a little nervous when it comes to talking about faith, and we think, Andrew, what if someone asks me a question, I don't have an answer, or what if they think I'm like a religious freak, or they don't want to hear about my faith? And so let me just offer some simple ways that you and I can just be bold and also respect others when it comes to talking about Jesus. Maybe you got a friend, and they got injured at work or at the gym, and maybe you just send them a simple text and say, "Hey, I want you to know I'm praying for you." Or maybe you're out to coffee with a friend and they open up about a relationship challenge they're having. And maybe you respond with something like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. I've actually been there. And are you okay? Can I share what helped me?" And maybe you talk about your small group or something that God did at your church and your life. And it's like, it was impactful to you. Or maybe it's as simple as just talking about what God is doing in your everyday life. It could be a sentence like, I've been really working on being more patient. Can I tell you a little bit what God is doing in my life? You see, people today, they are hungry to hear how God is moving. And one of the best things we can do is be bold. 2 Timothy 4:2, again, Paul says, "Preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction." Paul says, be patient. Meaning the first time you invite someone to church, they may say no. Or they may come once and then not again for another 6 months. Or they may ask you to only pray for them when their life is falling apart. Paul says, be bold and have patience. Because you see, faith is a journey. It's usually 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So you don't need to be pushy or weird about it. Just look for the moments where people open the door of their lives and see how you can make the most of that opportunity, how you can take a chance and speak boldly. You see, how do we live in the end times? We stay faithful, we speak boldly, and then finally we serve passionately. Paul writes and says this to Timothy, chapter 4, verse 5. He says, "But you keep your head in all situations, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, discharge all the duties of your ministry." Now, this word ministry, it means service. The idea here is we are all called to service. There are times where God will ask you and I to step up and serve. With this weekend being Father's Day, I decided to read up and learn about the origin of Father's Day because I'd never heard the story. And so I learned about it this week, and I thought it was pretty incredible. Back in the early 1900s, Sonora Smart Dodd was about 16, and she was the oldest of 6 kids. And suddenly her mom passed away. Now, her family was poor. Her dad was a farmer, and they were barely making ends meet. And Sonora just watched as her dad was transformed. I mean, he, of course, was heartbroken over the loss of his wife. But she watched as he made a decision that he would dedicate his life to investing in his 6 kids. He decided he would do everything in his power to be there for them every day, to love them, raise them, and provide for them. And so she watched as her dad dedicated his life in service to her family. And as she got older, she began to hear similar stories of other dads. and decided, you know what, there needs to be a day where dads are celebrated, because dads at their best, they serve their families. Now, this act of service for her dad was, of course, born of tragedy. But you see, all of us, we have these moments where we're called into service. Around here, we have people who serve the next generation because they care about investing in the future of our community. We have people who show up early to set up and people who stay late to tear down on our campus. We have people who serve our friends who are homeless. We have people who are on the security team and they keep our campus safe. And we have a whole bunch of people who serve throughout our community. Why? Because living a life of service matters. I mean, looking at our world and seeing opportunities to serve and bless, it matters. And so they do it because they are passionate about serving others, because they know as they do this, they are growing closer to Jesus. Now, why are we talking about all this today? Well, it's because so often when it comes to talking about the last days or heaven and eternity, people think, that's all in the future. But you see, when the Bible speaks about eternity, about the last days, it's talking about how we live right here today. I mean, this mindset, it even affects how we talk about the core message of Christianity. I mean, you may have heard someone say something like this. Most people, they think the point of Christianity is this: to get to heaven when you die. The idea here is that what God does, that what salvation is, it's something for us in the distant future. But I love what John Ortberg says. He says, what if salvation isn't mostly about getting us into heaven, but about getting heaven into us? You see, God is way more concerned about the person you and I are becoming than most of us realize. So today, what if we turned our attention to how we live, knowing that all of us, we only got so much time left on this planet? And so today, I want to close with an opportunity right here at our church, in our community. Some of you know this. Last year, our local school district, Newport Mesa, came to us, and they shared a need. They let us know that there are about 1,500 kids right here in our community whose families are really struggling. Now, about 1,000 of these 1,500 kids are considered homeless. And right there, that should give us pause that we got 1,000 kids in our backyard with nowhere to live. Well, one of the biggest needs as these families approach next school year is shoes. I mean, most of you know this. Kids, they go through shoes like crazy. I mean, they're constantly growing. And so these families, this creates a massive financial need. So last year, the school district came to us and said, hey, is there any way you guys can help? So last year, we partnered with a couple of other great local churches, and we put the word out, and we collected over 1,200 pairs of brand new shoes. It was amazing. And so guess what? This year, we got the same opportunity. So today, I want to invite you into what I believe is one of the best ways that you and I can serve, can bless, can even share Jesus boldly. You know, it's way easier to talk than it is to actually serve. Last week, I interviewed a staff member from Newport Mesa. Her name's Christy Flores. And I got to hear story after story of how the families we served last year, how they were blessed. There's one family, a single mom. She's got 3 kids. She's working 2 jobs, barely making it. I mean, this mom is overwhelmed, anxious, stressed. But she got to come last year, and she got to pick out 1 pair of shoes for each of her 3 kids. I mean, you look at the faces of those kids, and you look at the faces of all of these kids right here. And I mean, you see the difference one act of service can be. So this year, I want to invite you to serve a kid you will probably never meet. Today, I want to invite you to serve someone in need, and by doing so, to take 1 step towards looking like Jesus. Here's the easiest way to do it. I'd encourage you to pause this video right here, go to the website right here, and you can pick out a pair of shoes for a kid, and you can serve them today. Now, as we get ready to close, I just want to say this. I am so grateful to be part of a community that is passionate about looking like Jesus more and more every day. Let's pray. God, we thank you. You are so good and so gracious. And God, as we continue in this series, we thank you that you have called us to live lives that matter today. And so, God, I pray for every one of us. For those of us who have already made a decision to follow you, I pray, God, that we would stay faithful. For those of us on the fence, I pray, God, that we would take a step. We would investigate. We would maybe reach out or maybe just say a prayer. Hey, God, if you're real, can you show up in my life? God, I pray for us to speak boldly about how you've changed our lives. And God, I pray we'd serve. I pray we'd serve our schools, our families. God, help us to live lives of service today. We love you. We pray all this in your son's name. Amen.